And there we are. Hi guys. So as of now, lots of other things going on. So we'll see how this is going today. I'm kind of swamped today myself, actually, but it's always good to have a couple minutes to talk about minimum viable products. At least that's the topic for today. So I don't know. I know Lou has kind of something going on for a little bit there in the background. Jordan, are you driving? Sounds like you might be driving.
Yeah, I'm in the car right now, so I'm just joining by phone.
All right, no problem. So as you guys can talk, if you can't talk, that's fine. We can also just take this easy today. But I thought about talking about minimum viable products because over the last couple cohorts and peer groups at Co-Starting, we talked about it a lot. Well, actually not explicitly, but it's always a big topic, right? Because I think, especially in early days of startups and new projects, a lot of us tend to over-engineer. You heard me say this a million times. I am one of those guys. I over-engineer everything, and that becomes in your head your version 1, right? Which, of course, most of the time it's not. I think we have a couple of really good examples today going on in the community, actually, where the tightrope walk between launching something great and just launching the minimum viable product is kind of the internal struggle for us entrepreneurs, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit about what does that truly mean, because I think by now MVP is just such a common word. We use it all the time, but are we truly living it? So if you guys have any experience or any stories you want to share, we could start that now. And we have one more attendee. Hey, Doug.
Hello, Sven.
How's it going?
It's going well, thank you. How are you doing today?
Pretty good, thanks. I was just giving a bit of an intro about minimum viable products and, how we, I guess, say this a lot today, but that we need to launch with a minimum viable product, but are we truly living it? I think is the next question. But before we go into that, maybe just give Jordan and Lou a little bit of an intro about yourself.
Hi, Jordan and Lou. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a web developer in Southwest Florida, obviously, where I don't know. I guess people could be from all over the place, but and I've got some ideas for a couple apps that are unrelated to my day-to-day work. And the post today caught my attention, and I'm just interested in your thoughts on minimum viable product. I like the graph that kind of showed the iteration, and thought it was. I was actually just talking to my wife about a web scraping app that we see some market opportunities in, and how to go about incrementally developing it. So I'm interested in other people's viewpoints.
Awesome. Yeah, glad you jumped on. So it sounds like you saw it on the coders group, probably, right? My post?
Yeah, yes, that's correct.
Awesome, good. That means I need to share it there from now on. Someone noticed.
Excellent.
Cool. Yeah. So I know Jordan's driving, Lou is doing something real quick in the background, so they're just listening in for now. But maybe
I'm available to talk.
Oh, you're okay. Great.
I'm not able to be on video right now.
All right. So I want to maybe start there, right? What I just kind of outlaid, minimum viable products. We use the word a lot, but what does it really mean? Because I know, and I think he doesn't mind using his name, but Timo, he was on cohort 2 in the co-starting community, and he's working on a product called Plot Maniac, and he struggles with that, I think, right now a little bit. Unfortunately, he's always still at work at this time. But I'll just put him on the spot as a good example. So he's building this product, right? He's a software engineer, and he's a perfectionist, right? Like many of us. So he keeps building and keeps building and keeps building and hasn't launched yet. And of course, that's kind of one of the many sins we kind of fall into sometimes as entrepreneurs and as makers, where we sit in our basements or in our offices or wherever it might be, and we come up with all of these features, and all of them are critically important, right, in our mind. But is that really true, right? What is like let's really focus in on that first word. What is the minimum version we can launch with? And that could be something entirely different than what the ultimate product vision is, right? So if you think about this picture I shared in the post, right? Maybe the ultimate picture is this sports car, but that's not the solution, right? Like maybe that's the ultimate product, but what are we building a solution for is probably for transporting something, maybe ourselves. So what's the minimum viable product for that? It's probably not the sports car, right? Which is the version 1. So I think that's kind of setting the frame. So curious to hear about from you guys, Doug and Jordan, maybe if you have any examples from the past where a good or a bad example, right? Where we might have over-engineered and therefore kind of shot past the MVP and lost our opportunity to get customer feedback early, right? Like customer-centric kind of development and design we talked about last week. If anyone has any experience there, let's start there. And Jordan, we have him twice.
Hi, Jordan.
You're muted, Jordan. Oh, did I? No. Do I have to leave you in the other here as well? Are you using the audio from this one?
Yeah, that's the one I'm using my audio. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so I'm really glad that you brought up this topic because this is something I've actually been dealing with a lot lately with some clients. For those of you that don't know who I am or what I do, my name is Jordan. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for Stickboy. So Stickboy, we're a local technology company right here in Southwest Florida, and what we specialize in is custom software development and mobile app development. So we're creating new technologies. We're building software platforms from scratch, launching mobile apps constantly for our clients. That's kind of our bread and butter. We also do managed services, and we have a sister company that does website design development and digital marketing, but our biggest strength is custom software. And so, being an agency where we have a number of different clients with a number of different challenges, number of different products that they're trying to bring to market in different industries with different target audiences and all these different things, every single one is unique, right? And so a lot of them have this big vision, right, of what they, to your point, Sven, they can see the sports car in their mind. Now, can they take that and put it into a plan to build the sports car? No. They have most of our clients, that's why they come to us, right? We're the team. We have the experts, and they can focus on their business and their industry and what they do best in making the business a success, but we can help them build it, right? So taking that idea from their mind, putting it onto paper, so to speak, not actual paper, more like a whiteboard or a Google Doc, mapping everything out and getting that kind of big picture is always going to be the first step. Before we do any coding, any development, from there we can understand, okay, what are the must-have features and what are the nice-to-haves, right? So what is the scope of work for the MVP and what is going to be the scope of work for phase 2 or phase 3, future additions, whether you want to improve the user experience or add additional features, whatever it might be. But we always start with whittling that down to what are the must-have features and what does that look like in the form of an MVP? That is literally where we start with every single software client. And so a lot of times we'll break off that, we call it a blueprint phase or a technology and design workshop, where really it's everything, all the planning, research, scope of work, budget, timeline, the tech stack we're going to be utilizing, all the documentation, wireframes, all of that kind of blueprint that you need to build any sort of software solution. We'll kind of break off that piece on the front end as its own little mini project that we call a technology and design workshop, or some people call it a discovery. We'll use the term blueprint because at the end of that project, they'll have the blueprint. It's essentially everything we do up until we start coding. And that allows us to kind of take out of our mind the technical, like, how is it going to happen, right? Let's not focus on that. Let's talk about what are we trying to accomplish from a business perspective and how are we going to execute that? And then our team can then take that download of information, put together a plan with wireframes, put together a scope of work, with a budget and timeline, we can present that to the client and they can say, yep, that looks exactly right, let's get started. Or they might say, hey, that's close, but I was thinking really maybe something different, and then we would tweak it from there. And all of this happens before we do any coding whatsoever. It's all in the planning phase, and then the product of that first project phase is the blueprint, right? The documentation, the technology stack, the scope of work, the wireframes, the budget, the timeline, everything that the client needs to essentially take it and bid it out to anyone, to any software development firm or developer, and then they can be able to give them an idea of what it's going to take to build that. So that product is the scope of work for the MVP. So my point is that's our starting point for pretty much any complex software build. If we're talking about a software integration project, or maybe some smart automations, or implementing an out-of-the-box software, that's a different story. But for any custom build from the ground up, we always start with that phase one discovery, put the plan together before we even start doing any sort of back-end infrastructure, architecture, or anything like that.
So you touched on a bunch of points there, right? So actually, what's interesting is that from your point of view as an agency, there's already quite a few differences, right? Like, so you're battling those two personas, which the solo entrepreneur maybe battles in themselves, right? Like, that's your customer. So you probably have certain advantages, surely also certain disadvantages you have to deal with there. But that in itself I find interesting. But what you said there is that you're trying to focus on what the client wants to accomplish, right? And that goes back to what I was just mentioning. It's like, okay, what is it that we're actually trying to do? Are you trying to build a sports car? Or are you trying to move something? Or what is it, right? Like, it's the problem solution issue, right? Which, are you actually trying to build a sports car for the sake of building a sports car? Or is there something you are actually trying to solve with the sports car? And can it only be done with a sports car, right? There are certainly problems out there where you do need a sports car for it, but but you guys catch my drift, right? Like, so if it is getting people from A to B in this picture, can it be done with a skateboard? Can it be done with a scooter? Can it be done, I don't know, with Uber, right? Like, do you need your own fleet? Like, I think that's kind of where we are getting into that, like in your early phase, that design of that minimum viable product, firstly understanding what is the problem we're trying to solve, right? Which is, of course, huge topic space in itself, and really being cognizant about that, and not falling in love with our solution, because certainly I'm guilty of it all the time, because as engineers, as makers, right, like, we like to create things. And we like the creation of it, right? And the product. So sometimes we lose kind of sight of, okay, what is it actually what we're trying to solve? Because as a creator, sure, that might be it, but that's a hobby. If I want to make it into a business, it needs to solve a problem that actually people have, and not just look pretty at because I like what I did. So maybe that's a good point to kind of hook into as well. Doug, you said you're thinking about a web scraper. So how are you approaching that? Like, give us some insight into the problem you're trying to solve, and what do you think would be like a version 1, right? Like, what's the smallest thing you can build to prove that product? Which I think, correct me if anyone thinks differently, but the point of the MVP is to prove that the problem we think exists actually does exist.
Right. Right. I think the topic is really important for me. Listening to Jordan too, one other feedback, Jordan, I'd like to get how you handle once a project starts, the waterfall approach, obviously, versus an iterative approach. Even after you get your requirements doc and your blueprint, and I'll answer your question, but I do want to kind of plant the seed with Jordan to be thinking about it. When you start the project, how do you address the iterations even within the project, right? Because software, especially, unlike, let's say, building a home, where even I was a builder for a number of years, and even when you start a home, you might have a blueprint, like you said, a scope of work, a budget, a timeline. But then once the project gets going, there's some things that are going to change. Even the best laid plans are still going to have some iterations that were based on assumptions that they thought, but once the project started, those assumptions didn't prove to be true. And as it relates to Sven's point of it's the transportation, like how do you keep the main thing all along that project from the beginning, like you said. For me, there's two different things I'm trying to work on, and I like the skateboard to sports car. One is a web scraper. My daughter buys and sells pre-loved fashion, high-end fashion online. And one of the things that she has to do is go out and search sites for particular pieces. She's looking for a value, kind of the diamond in the rough. It could be something from the Row, which is a place in New York she follows. And it might be a blouse that sold for, $800 or $900 that somebody might have at a site for $80, and she knows the value because she loves that industry. And so she could buy it, let's say for $80, and then, do a better job with photography, etc. So I was thinking about a web app that would, and then I started thinking could have a commercial value in a web app that would go to certain sites based upon, could be buying batteries for power tools. That might be your thing. So there could be a lot of commodities where there would be value. So what does that minimum viable product look like for me, right? That one and another one, I've been in the Drupal development space, which is just like a WordPress Joomla kind of thing. But the industry has shifted to more of a Jamstack approach, not a decoupled architecture. So, and again, in that market, which may be the one that has the most market opportunity, what does it really mean to, convert a WordPress site, let's say, into a different stack? And how can we market that value? And how do we, what does the product need to do phase one? And what does it need to do phase 81? Right? What are the things that are going to be the same thing? And then how do I architect it? And I think right now that's the challenge I'm having, Sven and Jordan, is how do I really look at my app from an API standpoint? Like, how do I break down the problem from a software engineering standpoint? Like, how do I really look at the project and then break it into modules so that I am focusing? That's the thing I'm studying actually this morning before this happened. I was studying other projects to look at the structural bones of the project. Like, how did they develop the API? And that's got to be based upon business logic. So really overlaying the business logic with the architecture is what, I guess, a skill that I don't feel like I have sufficiently. I'm good at breaking down problems, but in this space, it's a new challenge for me to really architect it. So that's, I hope that was, benefit to you guys. So anyway, yeah.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And the good news is for you, Doug, is that you do, what the problem is.
Yeah.
You have a very clear idea of where the gap is. And you kind of answered, without realizing, you kind of answered your own question. And that's typically a first place starting point of any, we'll call it technology workshop. The very first meeting or call is about that download, where we take your brain and basically put it into a whiteboard. So an actual workflow. And, like you said, start talking about different modules and then really kind of map it out on a whiteboard. And then now we have your brain into something visually, and now we can start picking it apart and we can add to it and tweak it. And then we can say, okay, what are the bare minimum features that this has to have? No matter what direction we go, there has to be a backbone to the infrastructure of the app in terms of its capabilities, but really its purpose. It's more about what is the purpose of the app. And so you just have to figure that out very early on. Where is the value coming into the user or however you're monetizing it? So understanding your business model very early on. These are conversations you have to have well before you're worrying about what iteration your software is on. You know what I mean? That's kind of my probably biggest message would be that these are all questions that you want to answer. You want to have somebody in your corner, someone you can lean on to talk these out with and figure out what are all the different options and then say, okay, what's the best fit for what I'm trying to accomplish. So you got to look at who's your target market, what's the purpose of the product and how are they getting value from it. And then from there, you can start to build around, okay, what are the minimum features required to deliver that value? And then that is how you scope out your MVP. Everything else that is the nice to have, bells and whistles, it almost kind of becomes secondary because to your point, they may change 3 or 4 times. But once you build that MVP, now you have something to build on. By the time you're done with it, you've uncovered 4, 5, 6 different new challenges. You've figured out, maybe we have to pivot or change in all these different ways. So now going into phase 2, you have a foundation to build on and start adding the features that kind of hone in a little bit more onto your niche, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, Jordan. Thank you for hearing myself talk. You giving me the feedback was like, okay.
Yeah.
I think you listened very well, and I think I articulated at least some of the challenges sufficiently for you to. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I want to give you another way of looking at it too. So Jordan said a couple of interesting things: target market, purpose, value, right? Nowhere is there any talk about solution yet. I call that the DAP triangle a lot, right? Domain, audience, problem.
Mm-hmm.
Again, no solution.
What do you call it? The what triangle?
The DAP triangle, DAP. Which domain are you in? What audience are you serving? What problem are you solving for them, right? Mm-hmm. You can lock 2 of them in to find a third. You need to lock 2 of them in actually to find a third, right? So, and I think to really step back before, again, I think this is the theme so far, before you think about any solution, figure out what the problem is you want to solve, right? Mm-hmm. You either know the problem or you know the audience you want to work with, right? So for example, Petru, one of the community members, he works with people with disabilities, right? And his domain is architectural barriers. How do they get around? He locks those 2 in. Now he's solving the problem of like mapping those architectural barriers, right? But he knew he wanted to work with those people in this domain. Then he figures out the problem they have. He confirms that they have that problem, first of all, because he just assumes, yeah, sure, we assume a lot of things, but a lot of times we're assuming they're wrong, right? Mm-hmm. And then he's figuring out what the right solution is for it. However, and that's probably where I'll start to deviate from Jordan's approach with the agency. With co-starting, I preach all the time, launch as early as you can with whatever it is, right? Like it's going to be shit, and that's good. I forgot who said it, but there's one of the famous entrepreneurs said, if you're not embarrassed of your first version, you did it wrong, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, take that with a grain of salt, of course, but
yeah, right.
But meaning for your product, it sounds like at least the WordPress Drupal thing, right? Like that's a big thing. Rather than scoping everything out, and then as an agency, you have to do that, of course. But if you go that way, that's fine. If you're planning to do it by yourself, kind of bootstrapping, iterative, then I think ask yourself, what is the one feature your audience and the problem space you identify can't live without, right? Or
the
one
must have. What did you say, Jordan? The must-haves versus the what?
Yeah, the nice-to-haves.
Versus the nice-to-haves.
Yeah, right. So what's that one feature? Got it.
Right. Like, so it's 2 ways of looking at it, right? So Jordan called it the bare minimum for your solution, your whatever, this big thing you want to build. What's the bare minimum of that? What are the 5 features you need? Or what is one feature you can start working on which will fit into your kind of vision, but gets you out there, gets you talking to actual customers, maybe gets customers paying, and then you can listen to them. Because you can plan 1,000 features for 3 years, and that's, what the big corporations are still doing today, a lot of them. Or you can just actually put the customer at the center, develop a minimum viable product for them, one feature, as small as it could possibly be. Maybe it doesn't even do anything, right? Sometimes a minimum viable product is a landing page where you just want to confirm clicks, whatever it is. So think about that, like those 2 approaches. Again, we need to know much more about your actual, challenges, but like I personally like to preach that because as solopreneurs, as indie hackers, right, as bootstrappers, that approach more often is more reasonable, especially if you don't have funding or money, right?
Yeah, I fit
Yeah,
that.
so
The solopreneur, I mean, that's me. The indie, I mean, all those things
Awesome.
describes me. So yeah, thank you. But I mean,
yeah,
it's
so
nice because we got an agency approach, and a lot of times you're borrowing. Well, wow, that worked for an agency. I could also, you know, and the solopreneurs have different approaches at agencies. So I,
Right,
you know,
and
I have
and vice
yeah, it's nice.
yeah, vice versa. I mean, just hearing some of what Sven was sharing, gets me thinking about some of my clients, some of the projects we're working on, some of the struggles we're having to kind of get out the gate. We have this huge vision. How do you, crawl before you walk, before you run? But you got to start crawling. I think that's the point. Is you gotta put something out there. You have to get market research. You have to get feedback. You got to get actual users to get that feedback. So to Sven's point, the earlier you get a product out there, even if it is just one feature, that main, must-have feature that's going to be there no matter what direction it goes, and maybe that's something, that maybe that's an approach we even take as an agency for some of our clients. So, there's a lot we can learn from each other, which is why I love this whole concept, Sven. And thank you again, for asking me to join.
Yeah, thank you.
Lou, you wanted to add something, I think?
yeah, I was just gonna kind of jump in and kind of mention like with MVPs, there's multiple approaches to it. So the approach that we've been kind of discussing here has been more technical or feature based. Another approach we can look at is more of market demand based, right? So kind of touching on what Sven was saying is that how do we basically understand if what we're trying to build, there's a market for it? Before we stroke a line of code, before we do anything, how do we get buy-in from our potential users? Secondly, how do we get feedback so we know which features to build? So approach that we've taken a lot in the past is basically kind of like what Sven was saying, build that landing page, a landing page that basically kind of outlines what goals you're trying to build, what problems you're trying to solve, and then start driving users to it. And then once the user's there, give them the offer of, be an early beta user or whatnot, see how many people actually sign up. And then from those signups, you kind of know, okay, you know what, those people are interested, they have this problem, they want to solve, and there's enough value in this problem for them that they're willing to give up their email address. So that's the first, we call it, opening up your wallet, right? It's when people start really giving value back, that you're providing real value. And then from there, those are your earliest adopters. And those are the ones that know that, hey, you know what, this is a new product. They're going to be an early adopter. Those will be the ones that you can actually reach out to, get that feedback from, saying, hey, you know what, these are the features we're thinking about building. What problems are you solving? And go from there. And, I think, in my opinion, that's, it depends on how much feedback you've gotten so far. But if you're starting from zero, that might be the easiest first step. That'd be the fastest first step, and probably most inexpensive because you're not stroking any code. You could do it really quickly. I mean, crap, if you really wanted to, you can spin up, a card site in 20 minutes, pop in what you need, spend, let's say, $100 or less or whatever, 20 bucks in Facebook ads, drive some people to it, or just drive people in your network to it. So anyways, that's like my thought on a very low cost, super quick way to start.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Lou. I think that MVP certainly does not always just mean the product itself, right? Like, I think there is an MVP to every single stage of your business. What's the minimum viable marketing plan, right? Like, I mean, again, if you don't have funding, if you don't have an endless runway, which really no one does, but just how can you prove it as quickly as possible, right? And anything. So I think focusing, and I still make this mistake all the time because I just like creating, like I said earlier. But how can you, as quickly as possible, prove that someone else but yourself, because that's often where we start, right? It's like, well, we see a problem in our life or we experience something. It's like, oh, that's got to be a problem for everyone. Well, all right, let's just prove that, right? Before we actually spend a year or more working on something. I'll give you an example. If you go to that website, well, if you go to my blog post there, whenever you have time, right? Don't do it now. It's kind of lengthy. But Grubbery was an app I worked on for years. This was one of my first entrepreneurial ventures, and always on the side. And we started off completely different. Like, it had a couple of product pivots, but it never really launched. We even had partners, right? Like, it was like a food discovery thing. We worked with restaurants. We had so much stuff, and then we started engineering and designing and working on it for years. And we never fucking launched a thing. So we never got feedback from users, right? So it was useless in the end. I mean, I had it on my iPhone for a while, and I didn't launch it. And I don't know why. Today, I don't know why we didn't, right? It makes no sense. Because as soon as it did anything, we should have launched it. And yeah, sure, some people would have complained it doesn't look nice, but that's not what I'm trying to confirm, right? If they would have downloaded the freaking app, I would have known, okay, there is a problem for this, which we're trying to solve, right? Because they're downloading a supposed solution for it. Well, the solution wasn't great, but I think what I am personally struggling with a lot, and I'm curious to hear from you guys, is that we think we're going to lose these customers, right? But who gives a shit? Okay, we pissed off 200 people. There's millions more who have the same problem, if it actually is a problem, right? And I would argue today, we actually don't piss it off, because if you get feedback from them, you can make them, again, the center of your minimum viable product iteration, and you can build the things more than one person tells you that it is a problem. And you can tell them, look, I did this because of you. And you make them feel extremely special because they're the center point of your product. So, like, did any one of you struggle with this ever? Like, I still do it all the time, and I don't know. I keep telling other people not to do it, but then I fall back and I'm like, ooh, I like designing, right? Let me do this.
Yeah, I think it's our natural tendency to, not want to put anything out there with our name attached to it that's not something we can feel proud of and feel confident. But to your point, you'll get there. And, when you first put something out anyways, not that many people are going to see it. I think that's your point, Sven, it's not, it's going to take time to build that momentum. So those early days, you actually need that. You need to put something out there and get feedback, so you don't spend a lot of time and money on something that was the wrong thing to focus on, right? And so then you got to go backtrack, and now you undo everything you just did and start focusing on some other new problem, when if you identified that from the beginning, it really streamlines the process. So I think, to your point, there's a lot of advantages to it. You make a lot of really good points, Sven, and part of it, I think, is the strategy of how are you rolling it out, who are you rolling it out to, what is this, beta user base that's going to be testing your beta version. And, is this something that is more of a controlled environment where it's, friends and family within your network? Or are you, like you mentioned, are you pushing it out on some sort of Facebook ad campaign to a certain target market and just getting the general public on it and getting their feedback? So I think figuring out who you want to launch for and getting something out there as early as possible is important. But then having that strategy on getting the feedback and then applying it to the plan, right? Because that's maybe sometimes could be the part that people miss. And now, you're not getting as much value in terms of getting your product out there earlier. That's why you're doing it, is to get that feedback, to get that value from the users. And so making sure that you have a system in place to collect that feedback, and then have a loop where it comes back to the team and you're able to actually apply those changes, add additional features, maybe pivot the whole project in a different direction.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I wanted to ask you guys, if you ever try to set like a go, no-go decision or go, no-go definition before actually starting on anything, right? Like, I think what would be a good strategy is to have a go, no-go definition we need to reach for every single MVP we're building. Meaning, Doug, I'll piggyback on your first example for your daughter's use case, right? What would success look like? What would that need, to Lou's point, how big does the market need to be for the effort to be worth it to build this product, right? I think that's a business question we have to ask ourselves as entrepreneurs. If the goal is commercialization, right? If we're just trying to do good because we want to create something, sure, then that's fine. That's a hobby. It's not a business. So for you, I guess that would be an interesting exercise. Ask yourself, how many people like your daughter or in this general space would you personally need to confirm, right? Like, what's the go, no go? What is confirm before you start? And then maybe you can put that card website up, right? crrd.co, very, very easy website builder. Trying to kind of convey that problem and push it out, and then see if people react to it. Again, can be like sign up for a newsletter early, blah blah blah, right? Like we have all of these examples, of course. That would be interesting. Do you think that makes sense, or would you? What was your approach? Would you? Because it sounded like you're kind of trying to maybe build like an early scraper already, or does it make sense to maybe confirm that other people would use it first?
I think that was more of the pet project. I think the Jamstack, I think the larger market opportunity for me being in the web development space for 15 to 20 years, you see things, right? And that's partially you're scratching your own itch. I've had to convert many old static sites that haven't changed for years, and they don't need to be on a WordPress or a Drupal or a Joomla backend, right? That code, you have to constantly be doing security updates. It's a pain, just keep those sites, and they start to get, they're held together with duct tape and baling wire. And you're like, why am I doing this, right? Convert it, hop it onto Netlify, and now, change a few things with the contact form. So I've been scratching my own itch with this for a couple of years. And I'm like, there's millions, literally millions of WordPress and Drupal and Joomla, CMS, PHP-based CMS. So I think, to Lou's point, yes, I mean, I'm scratching my own itch. I know that there is a need because I'm kind of my own client, kind of a target market, so to speak. But I'm also going on a lot of assumptions. I'm
right.
And so I think minimal viable product, and I'm really glad I hopped into it because I was, really falling into that trap of falling in love with my product, right? And forget that. I mean, iteration one is really more about confirming, like you've all said, that there is truly a market opportunity and really learning what I don't know. I mean, that's the thing I'm afraid of. What am I not asking? And I think my clients at the beginning, if I'm trying to share a value proposition, I think I'm going to discover a lot that I just was ignorant of before I start coding. So yeah, this is a great meeting.
Who is the customer? Sorry, Jordan.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing. Yeah, can you go into more detail about what the problem is, what you're trying to solve, and who the end user would be?
Drupal 6. So say take this Drupal 6, and again, this is all jargon, right? But we can fill in the blank with jargon. There's Drupal 6 code bases out there, and there's probably a couple million of those sites. Drupal 6 has been end of life for over 2 years now. There is no updating your module for security updates. And these sites probably haven't been updated. And if they have, they're just very few and far between. So there's just one market opportunity where I can go with like built with, I can pay them to fill my pipeline. But why right now? Right now, what I want to do is focus on where is their pain point? Are they struggling? Do they have this question mark that keeps them up at night? Like, oh my God, I have to update that site. Well, maybe I provide a very affordable. Well, anyway, you know what I'm saying? It's
right.
My use.
Do they even know? Do they even know there's a problem? I think is what you're asking.
And that may be it too, right? That's maybe part of what the market opportunity is. Say, hey, I know Drupal 6 is end of life 2 years ago, and Drupal 7 is end of life a year from now. The new approach is this Jamstack approach. We help you make this transition. Your costs go down. Forget about security. The value proposition stuff, the feature advantage benefit. Here's what I'm thinking. I've developed it for myself. Give me some feedback. Sign up for the newsletter, whatever it is, and let's talk about this. So because we're going to be developing and I think Sven, something else that stood out here is when you look at that metaphor of the design process, the minimal viable product can be an awesome skateboard, right? It doesn't need to be a shitty skateboard, but it still is a skateboard, right? It's not the sports car, but every iteration I want to be quality. So I don't think I need to compromise, and you're confirming that. I don't need to compromise on minimal. I just need to redefine what it looks like so that a design and kick butt skateboard with the vision of here's where we're going, but let's start here, and does it solve the problem? Hey, this is an awesome little skateboard. Anyway.
Right. And I think I do want to challenge you though one more time though, like, because I can see a couple customer segments from, if I understand your solution or your problem space correctly, right? So someone has a website, right? Now, do they maintain that themselves? Do they work with someone like yourself or, one of the others, agencies, whatever it is? Because I think that those two right there that's a significant difference on who you need to target as the customer, right?
No doubt.
Are you planning on building a tool to allow the owner of the website to do it themselves? Completely different. Then are you trying to build a tool for people like yourselves to migrate these websites more efficiently, faster, whatever it is? And you talk to those two people entirely different, right? Like it's not even in the same ballpark, that those two products, I think.
Nope, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And then to the skateboard point, right? I think you're right. Depending on which direction that's going for you, and you can explore both, right? A/B test this, see if there is interest before you build, of course. But then once you decide on building that skateboard, it's like, well, then once you have that one side locked in, one of the two, then figure out what's the biggest problem for them. Maybe it's not the full migration. Maybe there is one plugin out there which everyone freaking struggles with. Can you build a solution for only that? And that gets them into your ecosystem, into your solution suite, right? Or what have you. Mm-hmm. So I think you're on the right path there.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's true.
Let's say hi to Radu for a second. How's it going, Radu?
Hi guys, nice to be here again. I listened a little bit of Doug conversation, and I like your passion, man. It's nice to hear that. I don't know what are your products or your services. I suppose you are in the software as a service marketplace, right? Because I came a little bit later, so I don't know exactly what you're doing. But it was nice to listen to you.
Are you asking me a question, or is it one for Sven?
Well, I asked a little bit all of your question because I just wanted a confirmation that you are in the software as a service marketplace.
Well, my specific app, I think, is a hybrid. I think what Sven mentioned, and I think it is an ecosystem. I think I'll end up producing a lot of helps, because just because somebody can do it doesn't mean they want to do it. So I think giving away a lot of information for me is going to be part of the success of the product. But I think with web design, because it's too nuanced, what I'm trying to figure out is what is the 80% that I can have the code do the heavy lifting, and then, but it won't be a sign up for the app, put your website in here, click this button, and out pops your code, connected with Netlify, whatever. I think it's going to be more nuanced, probably just because I don't have the capital, at least at the beginning, to, and I don't know that would be viable, quite frankly. I think figuring out what part the coach should do and what part people should do is still an important component in my work. So, helping clients take older websites and transition to the Jamstack, so they can, whether it's whether it's a Gatsby site with a React front end, with a Sanity backend CMS. There's a lot of options now in the web space. There's a lot of decoupled architecture. So I think monolith probably isn't even going to be a good market fit. I think sharing information, helping people, and then providing a service, whether per page or per whatever, that's what I have to discover based upon these agencies or the individual site owners. I mean, who are they right now? And I don't know that. So
Right.
this first iteration, I think, is really going to be more about discovering what the market is asking for, and than it is really even putting any strategic plan in place, other than what I already said. Nuancing the market versus an app, software as a service. I really
Yeah,
don't see
it
mine
sounds
being
it
that
sounds
way.
like it would start as more of a white glove service where you're actually almost like a consultant. They would be hiring you to come in and transition the site, and then through that process, doing it a number of times for clients, and like you said, having yourself as a proof of concept as well. You can decide, okay, what parts of this process need to be done manually, what parts can be automated, and then what is the tech stack I'm going to use to create that automation. Is it your own platform? Is it some sort of, I don't know, some sort of script or integration with some third party? That's what you need to figure out. So it sounds like you probably would start with that manual process. You can take that manual process and turn it into logic, and then a software developer can take that logic and turn it into what the code would look like. So yeah, I think that would probably be your best start, is to get a few clients under your belt, get feedback, understand what they're looking for, and then kind of mold your business model to focus on filling whatever that gap is.
Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I like the little deep dive there in like kind of one problem. So these meetings, these Tuesday sessions are, I still need to really figure out what we call them, but they're virtual coffee meetings, right? But they have taken more of a shape of a, want to say, fireside chat meets topic deep dive meets meetup, right? Like something in the middle there, because I'm trying to set kind of a general theme. And why I'm saying this is I want to call out to you guys, if you have anything specific you want to talk about, if you maybe even know someone who has a certain expertise we want to bring on here, right? I think it's been great over the last couple of weeks over the vastly different topics. We have different people jump in. They're usually touching you in one way or another in your entrepreneurial journey. So just let me know if there's anything you need help with, if there's anyone has a lot of expertise in something, or it's just a good speaker or something like that, right? Let's bring those people in as well. This is the experimentation kind of playground with these Tuesday meetings for the entire co-starting community. And then for whoever is not on in our Slack group yet, which I think most of you are, but there is also, I'm going to pop a link in here if you want to join that as well. I'm trying to do my best to share all of this stuff in all of the communities I'm a part of, but here is that link, just so you guys know. And we have one more person from Italy, actually. Hey, Marcello.
Hey, let me. Hey, Sven. Hi, what's up?
Not much. How are you? How's it going?
Good. Just finished working.
Awesome. Yeah, you just came into the tail end here of the conversation, but I was just saying to everyone, if you guys are interested, please join the Slack group. We're still a young community, but it's going well. And I'm happy to see two faces from Europe here on the call right now. So that's fantastic. Thanks for checking in. So with the last couple minutes, since Marcello just jumped in, maybe we'll do a super quick kind of putting him on the spot and see what his thoughts are on minimum viable products and his experience in the product development space, or not just development, but product owner. I think you had quite a few very relevant roles over your career. We talked a bunch of it, by the way. This is all live streamed, so you can watch the recap if you want on our YouTube as well. But Marcello, what does it mean? What is an MVP for you?
Oh, it's like good question. It's like I've done a bunch and still I wouldn't be sure of like the good definition. For me, it's like something can get like, well, it's kind of like what the definition goes by. Like something can get done extremely quickly with literally the minimum amount of resources. I feel like people sometimes, at least in my experience working with people, is like you tend to always overthink what really the MVP should have in terms of features, especially. That's something I've seen like many cases. You tend to overthink what, at least on my end, I saw that. They say, oh, you like the users also need that and that and that too and that too. Well, actually, if you really boil down the problem, if you know the problem very well, there's really maybe only one or two things that really makes the difference. So, and that's even before developing anything. Is like, okay, what really is the core issue here that maybe I should solve first. And sometimes you feel like, oh no, like no point. Like even the MVP, okay, is an MVP, but you feel like, oh, I still have to do at least this number of features anyway. That's like, without this 5, it's not even a point of even having anything out, even an MVP. So you say, okay, not 10 features, but 5. Those 5 must be in. And I feel like, okay, sometimes it's true, but my experience is like, if you think through it, maybe it's not 5, maybe it's not 3, maybe it's 1 or 2. So it's even less. So it's like, maybe the MVP could be even more MVP, more minimum that you think. That's like from experience, like we, for example, develop an MVP. So, oh, this is like the MVP idea, and then you look at it. Yeah, this is quite advanced for an MVP. Maybe we can do like even simpler and faster. And what really is the thing that makes it good or different? And maybe forget about the rest. And then you can even like more minimum. What I'm saying, so what, like long story short, is like, if you really think it through, you can always make your MVP even more MVP than what it is, because maybe that's all you need really to prove the idea, which is one of the core goals of an MVP. So MVP can be simpler. They can be simpler if you think through it.
I love it. I think you just summarized pretty much the last 45 minutes very, very well.
Okay.
And I mean, I wholeheartedly agree, right? I think sometimes your MVP can be a tweet or a post in a Facebook group, right?
Exactly.
Because you just want to prove something. So really, I think if we go away from this call today with anything, is take that, like ask yourself, what is the smallest thing, right? If it still takes you, is there an MVP that you can execute in one day?
Yeah.
There always is, right? So I'll challenge you to this. Whatever you're working on, try to drill it down to that and tell us about it. That'd be cool.
Okay.
That'd be cool to know.
Love it.
Awesome. Well, fantastic, guys. Because we're trying to stay on time, we're going to end it here. But thank you so much for joining. I will invite you guys next time. We do these every Tuesday, as you know. And hopefully I'll see some of you in our Slack community. And we'll take it from there.
What is the Slack community? Is it the Southwest Coders? Is that or is there a different one? That's how I found you today, through the Southwest Coders. Is there a separate Slack group?
There is. Here is the link for it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot, Sven. There's a lot of really good stuff. I appreciate it. I got a lot of really good takeaways from today. I'm gonna, just like you said, I'm gonna apply it to some stuff I'm working on, and maybe we'll recap and see how things go.
Awesome.
After the next week.
Great. Thanks for having you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
We'll see you next time.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.